All right, welcome back to Hometown Spotlight on Hometown 1340 WLVL. I'm your host, Frank Miller, and we're talking today with local author Christina M, and we're discussing her book, The Secret Sand Circle, which kind of revolves around mental health. Christina, in the last segment, you had mentioned working with some respected psychologists and also the Erie County Commission of Mental Health. How did that experience help shape the material? I mean, I know you kind of touched on it a little bit, but as far as like their feedback and different things, did you go back and make significant changes based on their feedback, or how did that whole process work out when you were consulting with them?
When I worked with Sarah Bonk, who was the Commissioner of Mental Health, she just kept saying, how did you get this? Like, how did you do this? Because this is so, not only in the creation of the characters, but in the actual way that the social services and mental health work and how it works with people. Sarah gave me very little to change. She just loved it. Mm-hmm. Karen Rubicki, who was the Commissioner of Social Services, was very helpful because there is a social service aide who helps the Cuban immigrant girl, Solana, that we talked about earlier. And I had her as being a little crusty. Karen said, you could soften her. Like, she doesn't need to be that way. And so I was grateful for that feedback. When you're sitting in a room writing a book for a year and a half, it never occurred to me how social service workers might feel reading a character like that. And I don't want to offend anybody because social service workers are underpaid and overworked and dedicated. Yep. So I was glad that I changed that woman. And in the end, she comes forward and does something remarkable for Joe at the very end relative to Solana. And it's just wonderful.
But you have to read the book to find out.
Yes, absolutely.
No spoilers. It's funny. It's almost like you have a copy of my questions here, because that actually was one of the next things I was going to ask you. I mean, after going through the process of all the research, writing the book, getting feedback, how has that changed your perspective on the mental health landscape? Because like you said, I mean, there's still kind of a stigma. It's something, I think it's becoming more mainstream than it has in years past, but how has your perspective changed on it? And more importantly, after somebody reads this book, how do you think, or how would you like their perspective to change based on what you've written?
I think that mental health is a really deeply ingrained part of our world. Every single one of us has a brain, and so we have a mental health status. And sometimes we're good and sometimes we aren't. And the quicker, the sooner, the more willing we are to acknowledge that, and that there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with after, someone you love dies being depressed. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with when you have an accident, you don't want to get up and do anything because you feel so badly in your body, your mind can't function either. So for me, I think it is clarified. I've known that. I've always been a very mind, body, soul person. Mm-hmm. So I've always felt that way strongly. But I think it helps when someone who isn't sure or who struggles gets to read something. And this is fiction. Yeah. I'm not saying there's not truth in it, but there's fiction. And that when people read it, they can see, hopefully in one of these 5 characters, someone that has something that they can relate to and say, well, that happened. That person managed it. Maybe I can manage it too. Fiction a lot of times can be more inspirational than the real deal because it gives you the opportunity to insert yourself as that character instead of defining it as a celebrity or someone, you already know in the world. So that's always really important. And the other thing I think is so incredibly important, when someone experiences trauma or abuse, so many times they're ashamed. They're afraid to talk about it. The person who abused them, if they find out, they could make it worse. Mm-hmm. There's so many ways and reasons that they don't tell. And the Secret Sand Circle, I hope, will help them understand that this Secret Sand Circle is a 6-foot round circle in Joe's greenhouse. And it's got 2-foot high walls all the way around of wood. And there's 3 openings cut in it. Mm-hmm. And there's sand. And then there are long pointers that you can use like a stick, like a writing stick. And then there's stones with words imprinted on them. And then there is a big broom. And you can go into that secret sand circle and no one has to be there. Like Joe doesn't stand over their shoulders and watch what they do. Yeah. And they write or draw a picture, write words, use the stones. And of the things that happen to them, of this thing or things that they've had inside them that have been so punishing, so hurtful and harmful. And then they pick up the broom and rake it all away. And the only one who knows is the sand. And it's not going to tell anyone. Interesting. But you have been allowed to release those stories, those terrors, those fears from within you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, that to me, like, find a way there's always a way to release what is so hurtful to you. You just have to find out what it is or be willing to ask someone for help.
Yeah, because that's what I was going to ask you is like, what were you hoping people would get from this book? And I mean, as far as the mental health, there is definitely a physical component to it. I mean,
Absolutely.
even people that follow sports, if you look at CTE and all these different things
Absolutely.
where people have gotten physical injuries that have led to suicides and different things like that. So, I mean, this is this is definitely something that people needs to be more aware of. This book is actually going towards to help out a cause, and we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. Again, we're talking with local author Christina Apt about her book, The Secret Sand Circle. This is Hometown Spotlight. We'll be right back on Hometown 1340 WLVL.